Hello and welcome to the Space News Commercial Space Transformer series, where we aim to give you a behind-the-scenes look at the people and companies driving the space industry's commercial transformation. I'm Jason Rainbow, senior staff writer at Space News, and today I'll be talking to Awais Ahmed, who 6 years ago founded hyperspectral imaging startup Pixxel in India when he was just 20 years old. Fast forward to today, and the company has just released the first images from their recently launched Firefly satellites, which the company hopes will help build out a commercial market for hyperspectral imaging, which remains in its infancy. Avis, great to have you here. Pixel has been helping put India on the map for hyperspectral imaging, and I'm excited to hear more about how you're transforming Earth observation and tackling global challenges.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Jason.
Yeah, so you started Pixel at 20 years old. What inspired you to launch a space company of all things so early? And what were the biggest challenges in getting Pixel off the ground?
Yeah, I would say probably, I think a combination of two things, a childhood passion and obsession for space on the one side, and a little bit of naivety that comes with the youth of getting started so early, which thankfully, the momentum has kept on going. But, we started the company while we were still in the final year of undergraduate studies in India at a university in India.
Mhm.
But as I said, I think it all boils down to how much obsession and love there was for space. Like most kids, I was fascinated with space, and that love never really left me. But I think there were two very specific experiences at our university in India that led to Pixel. The first was I was part of a student satellite team that was working with the scientists at the Indian Space Agency. So they were teaching us as students outside of our courses on how to design, build, and operate satellites that would go up to space and operate there. So that was my first brush with physical satellites that I got to work on and learn how exactly hardware that needs to work in very high temperature and low temperatures and in vacuum needs to work up there in space. And then the second experience was being one of the founding members and engineering leads of the Hyperloop India team. Now, this was around 2017 when Elon Musk had started tweeting about traffic in Los Angeles and seemed like he wanted to rekindle the Hyperloop approach where you would build a vacuum tube and then you would have Hyperloop pods or small trains that would travel at really fast speeds. And as part of sort of checking what would work and what would not, SpaceX conducted this competition called the SpaceX Hyperloop Pod competition. We decided to participate while in college in the second year because we thought it might be a good chance to meet Elon. And then once we got through the first stage, we took it a lot more seriously and then kept getting through different design stages. And finally, out of 2,500 global applicants, 20 finalist teams were given a green light by the SpaceX engineering team that your design is robust enough to build something. So we figured out how to build it. We took it all the way to Los Angeles at the SpaceX headquarters. We were able to sort of race there. And I think that experience taught a whole lot on how to build something for which there was no how to guide on the internet, for which there was no chat GPT at that point in time, for which there was no one who could tell us what to do and what not to do. And finally, I think being there at one of the most innovative places on planet Earth for space technology, seeing those rocket engines being built and seeing the Falcon 9 booster that had landed back on Earth for the first time, I think all that gave confidence that if you could build a Hyperloop pod, maybe building a satellite was not that difficult. Turned out it was much more difficult and complex. But at that point in time, I think just looking at that, getting inspired, coming back, the idea was, okay, let's just dive in. Let's see what would work and what would not. I had about a year before I graduated and figured out what to do with my life and thought it was a worthwhile gamble to be able to see how this would work out or not. And thankfully, it has worked out since then. The challenges to your second question have predominantly been around, obviously, as young students, raising money and capital and having investors trust us and have faith in us that this was not just a college project. This is
Mhm.
something that we need to devote our life to, was a consistent challenge until at least the seed round that we had to raise, where we ended up raising about $8 million about a couple of years in. But I think the fact that we were able to raise a pre-seed even before we graduated gave a little bit of confidence that, okay, there are a few people that were willing to trust us. But fundraising for a hardware startup and a hardware startup that needs to be in space has always been a big challenge. And the other challenge for a company like us is, you have to build and launch technology and make sure that it works. And it's a very complex, it's a very time-consuming part of the business. And only then will you start to see some revenues coming in, which is when you build a business out of it. And that ends up becoming this loop where, investors, we need investor money because we can't get customer money, and investors want to see customer money before they put sort of money in us, and sort of figure out how to balance that and show progress on the technical front. So I think those have been a couple of the challenges.
Gosh, wow. Yeah, fascinating. So how has the commercial space industry evolved since you started Pixel in, I think, 2019? Has the business environment for space startups become easier or more, would you say, more challenging? I know there have been and continue to be a lot of regulatory shakeups in India that affect space.
Yeah, I think it has gotten both easier and tougher in different ways. I think it has gotten easier because there are way more launch opportunities now with SpaceX launching 2 or 3 launches a week.
Right.
There have been so many supply chain vendors that have come up from which you can purchase components for putting in a satellite or putting in a rocket, and the ecosystem and investors have seen returns come from space companies, right? So I think it's gotten easier that way every year. Investors have taken it more seriously, customers have taken it more seriously. The technology is moving towards a place where you can build satellites without breaking your bank. But it has also gotten tougher because it's if it's gotten easier for you, then it has gotten easier for other folks as well. So now you're ending up
Mm.
competing with a much larger pool of very talented folks globally, that you need to make sure that you're outperforming and that you're out executing. So I would say it's definitely gotten easier overall, but then it comes with its own minor challenges as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, many startups are navigating changing regulations, geopolitical challenges, and trade restrictions. How do these factors affect a company like Pixel, which operates in multiple markets?
Yeah, I think geopolitics plays a big part in a company like ours. The technology that we're building, 5-meter hyperspectral imagery, is actually, considered ITAR under the US munitions list because it is able to detect a lot of things on the defense and intelligence side of things, right? So you're not able to freely share the technology between different countries, and so you have to make sure that there are processes in place of what you're building, who you're sharing the information with, and so on. So I think geopolitics is kind of built into this business from day one. We have an office in El Segundo in Los Angeles. We have an office in Bangalore. Thankfully, the relationship between US and India is continuing to grow and get stronger, and there have been collaborative projects between the space ecosystems of the two countries, which has generally helped us make sure that we are penetrating into the US, whether it be through the NASA commercial small satellite data acquisition program that we got into, or whether that's working with the Indian Air Force and working on both sides of the ocean. But I think apart from that, for example, we have zero supply chain dependency on China, for example, because
Mhm.
there could be geopolitical considerations when you're working with both India and the US. We don't sell into China, we don't buy anything from China, for example. And there are a variety of different things that come into the picture. So we just try to stay out of the hot pools of water where it could end up being a problem down the line. And so you have to be really careful that way. And of course, each country from where you're launching your satellites and owning your satellites have certain restrictions in place for the licensing that they're giving you, that you're able to sell data freely anywhere, but of course you're not able to sell data to countries and companies in the sanctions list, as well as there are certain restrictions in place that a country can come and tell you to not be able to serve certain countries and so on and so forth. So I would say that's built in from day one, but I think it's also gotten a little bit easier. There have been certain technologies that have been moved from ITAR to EAR, export administration and regulations, I believe, which makes it a lot easier now to be able to export stuff from the US. And there are so many companies that have come up in Canada, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, from where you can actually, get stuff to build your technology as well.
Yeah. Okay. And let's dive into the capability itself. And you kind of alluded to this earlier. The Earth observation market is becoming increasingly competitive. So how does Pixel differentiate itself from, say, traditional multispectral satellite operators? And what's driving demand for this technology? And where do you see the biggest commercial opportunities today?
Absolutely. So I think the way that we looked at it when we started, and the thesis has held on surprisingly strongly over the last few years, is there are 3 types of resolution that you can look at when you're looking at imagery from space. There is the spatial resolution, there is a temporal resolution, and there is a spectral resolution. Now, those seem like fancy terms, but in very simple terms, a spatial resolution is how much zoom you have. So when you zoom on your phone camera, how clearly can you see things between each other? So when you say a resolution is 10 meters, it means you can see things 10 meters apart. And you have the likes of Maxar and Airbus in the world today that are able to do 30-centimeter spatial resolution imaging, but you only get it at one wavelength or so, right? So you have really strong spatial resolution that had already been solved for. Then you have temporal resolution, which is how quickly can you come over a particular area and image that area, right? And Planet Labs did a really fun, wonderful job over the last decade since they started by putting 150 to 200 satellites up there that capture almost every part of the globe every 24 hours. And at that scale, you're able to now see what's happening globally on a temporal resolution of 24 hours. And before that, it used to be like few weeks and so on and so forth. Finally, the gap that existed in the market was spectral resolution. It's how much beyond human eyesight and how much beyond normal cameras can you see. For the closest analogy I can give you, it's not a very accurate one, but if I've broken a bone and I go to a doctor, the doctor can't see what's broken with just a normal camera. You need to go to the other part of the electromagnetic spectrum, see through an X-ray on what's going wrong, and because X-rays are able to see in things that are not in the part of the visible electromagnetic spectrum. So similarly, hyperspectral cameras break light into about hundreds of wavelengths, in our case 250 wavelengths. For comparison, human eyes can only see three wavelengths: red, green, and blue. And so the fact that we're able to now see 250 wavelengths instead of just three or like eight wavelengths that today's satellites are able to do, that gives a difference on being able to see those invisible things. So that's what makes hyperspectral imagery possible, to see the unseen. So let me take an example. If you're taking an image of an area where there is an underground oil pipeline and there is an oil leak, you can't obviously see it because with normal eyes or normal camera, the oil leak is actually underground and it's not visible. But what happens is when there is a leak of oil, it changes the characteristics of the soil. And so with a hyperspectral camera, now you're seeing beyond human eyesight and are able to see the changes that occur in the soil and say, yeah, here's likely where an oil spill has occurred. And we're able to see that because we are going way beyond just the 3 or 8 wavelengths that today's cameras and satellites are able to do. And since no one else in the world was doing it commercially when we started, this was early 2019,
Right.
there had been a few satellites that space agencies like ISRO or NASA or the European Space Agency had built and launched, but they were very limited. The resolution was very coarse. They cost a lot of money, and no one could tell those satellites where to image. And if the customers wanted images of their own areas, you couldn't get that. So we said, okay, there's proven fact that hyperspectral can see so many more things, but no one is providing it commercially. So let's build the commercial constellation ourselves.
Right. So it's still early days for the commercial side of this market.
It
Um,
is, but the good thing is it's hyperspectral is like a superset, so you can do the same use cases you're doing today with multispectral as well as more things, right? So if you have two things in front of you where you're getting X number of things, but with hyperspectral you're getting the same X number of things, but you're also now getting about 5x the number of things. So that's where I think we don't need to start from scratch. The market already exists, but yes, it's a new data set that provides a lot more information.
yeah, all the things. So you recently deployed the first three satellites of the Firefly constellation. What's the roadmap for scaling the constellation, and how do you see it changing the commercial satellite imaging market as you evolve and other players in this market evolves? Where does the industry go from here?
Yeah, I think it was a long time coming for us, this launch. We had previously launched three demonstration satellites at 30 meters and then 10 and 10 meters that proved the hyperspectral concept, and we were able to provide that imagery to our customers and make sure that they were able to see the use cases we talked about firsthand through the imagery that we were providing them. But finally, I think with the launch of the three Firefly satellites that went up on the 15th of Jan this year, we are now able to provide commercial grade 5-meter data and at a very regular revisit frequency. With three satellites, we're able to come back and relook at any place on the globe every 2 to 3 days, which means that if I'm looking at New York today, for example, I can come back and relook at it in 2 or 3 days, and that can be possible for any point on the globe. Now we have three more Fireflies that are ready on ground that we just need to ship out to the launch site and have them launch. And that's going to happen sometime in the next couple of months with SpaceX. Once the additional three satellites go up and we have a total of 6 satellites up in orbit, we will have a daily revisit anywhere on the globe. So it doesn't matter if it is, Wellington in New Zealand or Tokyo in Japan or Los Angeles in the US. We can come back and relook at any point on globe every day. And so we can see what's happening, what's changing at a level of detail that's not been possible. And of course, with 250 wavelengths of light that previously was limited to only about 8 wavelengths or so with multispectral. That is for this year. We have 6 satellite launches before the middle of this year. We have one more satellite that's going up around October of this year. And finally, we plan to expand the total constellation to a total of 24 satellites. So apart from these six, an additional 18 satellites that will go up in either 2026 or early 2027. That should complete our constellation. And I think the wonderful news is that with the launch that happened in January, all of them have been successfully checked out and commissioned, and we're starting to receive some wonderful imagery from those satellites as well.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. That's no easy thing for a first time. Okay, well, so that the end game for this constellation, what's the latency there? And as you reduce the latency, does that open up different kinds of customers and markets? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I think the way that we look at it is like looking at the lowest common factor. So as to say, like, who is the customer that has the most demands, and that's usually defense and intelligence, where they want to be seeing things at least on a daily basis, if not better, right? So with 6 satellites, we can do daily. With 24 satellites, we can do that for every part of the globe every day, and even reduce that amount of time with the slew that we have on the satellites down to a few hours, right? So, but I think the fact that with 6 satellites, we can revisit any point on Earth every day, and with 24 satellites, we can revisit almost every part on Earth every day, which means now we are having a diagnostic scan of our planet on a daily basis that we can use to see that as soon as things start to go wrong somewhere, we can either let the government know or we can let the relevant organization know, so that we can not only monitor things, but we can start to prevent things that are going to cause harm to planet Earth. So I think getting to a daily revisit helps from that standpoint. But I think some agricultural companies that we work with, they want to see how crops are growing and how crop disease and pest infestation might be spreading at least every 2 to 3 days, right? And you need to be able to capture it daily, so as to not miss anything, just to make sure that you have backup images every 2 or 3 days for the agricultural use cases. Oil and gas, I mentioned, that is something that we need to do daily anyway, because those leaks can happen any point in time, and being able to curb those leaks quickly not only helps from an environmental standpoint, but helps companies save money, because the more leakages that happen, the more they are losing out in terms of their bottom line. And finally, I think being able to, everyone wants to know where is the lithium, where is the cobalt, where are the radioactive materials for either building batteries or EVs or looking at nuclear stuff. And hyperspectral can also help identify, they can map, you can map out an entire country and say where exactly what mineral is, and in what rough quantities that it might be there. A very good example is when the United States Geological Survey, they ran an aeroplane around Afghanistan in, I think, the 2000s. With a hyperspectral camera, they were able to find $1 trillion worth of new minerals that they were not able to find through other means, that because hyperspectral was able to show those things. Now imagine doing that at global scales for almost every country. Every country will know where its resources are, and we can be a lot more efficient as a civilization. So I would say that's where the use cases become important when we look at daily coverage. We look at with 250 wavelengths, and we look at it at 5 meters resolution.
Exciting stuff. Thank you. All right, then. So, looking ahead, do you see Pixel remaining focused on hyperspectral imaging, or do you have ambitions to expand into other areas of the space industry?
Yeah, I think that's something that time will tell, but we do definitely plan to expand into a lot more than hyperspectral. We build our own satellites, we design our own satellites, we build and design our own cameras. So everything from the conceptualization of how the camera should look like to how the satellite should look like, and being able to put it together, test it, put it up in space through someone else's rocket, and finally operating it. Everything except the rocket part is something that we do in that entire chain, which means that not only hyperspectral satellites, we can use that expertise to build and expand to other kinds of imaging. We can get to hyperspectral in the infrared range, a long wave infrared range, where you're able to see heat signatures and so on from a hyperspectral standpoint. You can also use those same satellites to be able to expand to other kinds of imaging. So there's definitely scope there, depending on what use cases we are seeing from the customers. In the end, it has to be the customers that are driving it, but not going to say no to the fact that we might want to expand it at some point in time. Beyond that, I would say, in let's say in a 5 to 10 year time horizon, being able to work with space agency, sending our hyperspectral cameras to the moon, Mars, the asteroid belt, mapping out what's there in the solar system in a lot more fidelity and a lot more resolution, will tell us, where on moon is, polar ice, and where there are certain types of minerals, and where on Mars will we need to be able to, set up our bases, and eventually which asteroids have water, which asteroids have metals, and so on and so forth. So being able to work with space agencies to map out the entire solar system, and hopefully at some point in time using that information to extract material and create habitats in space. But yeah, now we're in the 20 to 30 year realm. For now, we're focused on hyperspectral satellites, hyperspectral data, and hyperspectral analysis. But in the long term, I think the ambitions span the entire solar system.
Wonderful. Aviz, thank you so much for sharing your insights and the exciting work Pixel is doing. Please keep us posted on your journey and the evolving hyperspectral imaging market.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, Jason, and we'll keep you posted. Thank you.